Hello everyone, let's talk about blackface.
This is another of these videos where I feel like I shouldn't have to explain what's wrong with, as everyone and their grandmother should know that blackface is wrong by this point. But because Nate is a moron who fails to understand history, I unfortunately have no choice.
Blackface is a kind of makeup, for example burnt cork or grease paint, which is used to make someone look like a black person. So the question for this video is blackface racist?
Do I even need to answer this question? Everyone with a basic understanding of American history should know that yes, blackface is racist.
Well, first we have to define that word. Racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior.
Racism can also refer to a systematic discrimination of one group over the other. In the West, white people are favored over other races, for example, both consciously and through subconscious bias. The fact that blackface being inherently racist comes into question is an example of this.
So how about we look at one of, if not the most well-known example of blackface? Minstrel shows. These shows became incredibly popular in the US during the 1800s, but it isn't hard to see why they eventually died out. Minstrel shows commonly portrayed black people as being lazy, unintelligent, submissive, and childlike.
And I'm glad this type of overt, blatant racism is a thing of the past. Now if only all levels of racism would fade into the past. But why do I get the feeling that Nate isn't glad this type of overt, blatant racism is a thing of the past? Especially when you consider that members of his audience are also members of the alt-right, as in white supremacists and neo-Nazis, who actually do think of black people as being lazy, unintelligent, submissive, and childlike.
So yeah, it goes without saying that this kind of blackface is racist. However, what about other kinds of blackface?
The fact that this comes into question shows that racism runs deep in our subconscious way of thinking. And yes, blackface is racist, regardless of intent.
Before we can conclude whether or not something is racist, we have to put context into consideration. A few years ago, the actress and dancer Julianne Hough went to a Halloween party as Crazy Eyes from Orange is the New Black. And because the character is a black woman, Hough chose to wear blackface, which made her receive massive backlash.
First off, good job making me bash my own celebrity crush. Thank you, Nate. I will never forgive you for this. On to the main point. The reason why Hough received massive backlash for this was because of the negative historical connotation that painting your face black has. I'm sorry, but Hough shouldn't have went to that Halloween party as Crazy Eyes. And she shouldn't have painted her face black, especially with a negative historical connotation, regardless of what her intent was.
Why though? Hough didn't wear blackface to imply black people are inferior, she was merely trying to look more like the character she was portraying. How is this any different from a black woman wearing a blonde wig, a dress, and whiteface to be Daenerys from Game of Thrones?
Sorry, but the intent is irrelevant. Blackface is still an imitation of a black person, and carries with it the racist connotations of minstrel shows. The whiteface example you gave is different because Western society doesn't have a history of discriminating against or mocking white people. Let's look at stereotypes of Native Americans to illustrate an example of what I'm talking about. In the past, it was common to portray Native Americans as ignorant savages with poor English who might say something like, "How? Me big chief. Me live in teepee." I apologize to any Native Americans who may have been offended by my example, but I wanted to illustrate for educational purposes an example of a blatantly racist stereotype. A less overt example would be the University of Illinois mascot, Chief Illinois. While designed with a slightly more realistic appearance, it's still meant to be a Native American dancing for the entertainment of a predominantly white crowd.
One argument you may hear from people nowadays is that you shouldn't say things like, "I don't see color," because color is part of what makes us who we are, and when you claim to not see color, you are, in a way, denying their existence. But if you agree with that reasoning, why would you get mad at people like Hough? The fact that she chose to wear blackface as part of her portrayal shows that she does see color, she isn't colorblind, yet Hough was still shamed anyway. Think back for a moment to how many times you've seen male comedians wear drag to play female characters. We would never call this sexist though because we understand they're not implying women are inferior, they're simply playing a funny character. So why can't we hold blackface to the same standards we hold drag?
Unfortunately, Nate is right, but he's right in a way he didn't intend. We should hold blackface to the same standards that we hold drag, mainly because men and women's clothing as comedy is actually offensive as well. and implies that there's something inherently strange about a man who chooses to be gender non-conforming, and can also be transphobic as well. as there's a perception of trans women that they're just men in women's clothing. Thankfully, that has mostly faded away, but elements of it still remain.
Now, I know what the response to all of this will be. People will argue that blackface is still bad regardless of intent because of the historical implications of it. However, this argument is nothing more than guilt by association. There is no reason why blackface cannot be judged on a case-by-case basis. Having this narrow-minded view of blackface ignores different cultures. For example, there's an annual festival in Portobello, Panama called the Festival of Diablos and Congos. And during this festival, people who paint their face black are meant to symbolize freed Africans. Unlike minstrel shows which perpetuate negative stereotypes, this festival is about celebrating liberation and African culture.
The problem with that is, Panamanian culture is largely unfamiliar to the English-speaking part of North America. Even if you intend to celebrate this cultural event, African Americans in America are only going to see a white person in blackface. It might not carry the same brutal racism as minstrel show blackface, but in the US, blackface is a very specific connotation. Also, just because something is part of a tradition doesn't necessarily mean it's not racist. For example, in the Netherlands, there's a little helper to their Santa Claus called Black Pete. Some are saying that Black Pete is offensive, and opinions are divided in the Netherlands on this issue.
So, to finally answer the question, is blackface racist?
It feels like I'm a broken record here, but yes. How many more times must I and everyone else who responded to this video tell you this?
Ultimately?
Oh Jesus Christ, no. So, it isn't enough for Nate to just defend blackface in this video. He actually has to appear in blackface. I'm sorry, but can someone tell me how Nate isn't a racist again?
It all depends on context.
Hi, I'm that guy T, and I approve this message.
Nope, connotations override context. Even Shoe on Head, one of the most popular anti-social justice channels on YouTube, sees that blackface is racist because of the connotations it carries. That guy T, or as I like to call him, talking head for racist white people talking points regarding how black people are less oppressed than white people, may agree with you. But how many other black people that you know agree with you? Your point would have been more convincing had it featured more who agree with your point. In conclusion, yes, in America, blackface is racist, even if the intent isn't to belittle or mock. Until next time, I'm Danny Quartz. Thank you all for watching.